Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month.
Welcome, everyone, to the Michelle Meow Show at the Commonwealth Club of California. We'll be talking tonight with Chasten Buttigieg. I got both of his names correctly there, I think.
You did. That was impressive.
Whew, bring down the curtain now, because I won't do it again. We'll be talking with him about the new young adults version of his memoir, I Have Something to Tell You, as you can see the book right there, which is going to be released next week. Am I correct?
Yes, Tuesday the 16th.
Great. We owe a big thanks to our friends at TransClinique tonight whose support helped make tonight's program possible. Also, this program is part of our Bernard Osher Good Lit program series, so thank you to the Bernard Osher Foundation. At the Commonwealth Club, we are producing hundreds of programs a year on a wide variety of topics, online as well as mostly in-person programs right here at the Commonwealth Club. So head over to commonwealthclub.org for more upcoming programs, as well as video and audio from past events. You'll also, of course, find information for those of you who are not members on how you can join our wonderful club. If you're watching us live on YouTube, you can use the chat box to ask some questions. But if you're here in the room, we have some question cards spread throughout the room. Write down your questions, and we have a volunteer who will pick them up and deliver them to me, and we'll work them into our discussion here tonight. And for any teachers or students in the room, check with Kyra at the back of the room or out in the hallway. We have some free books for students and educators, thanks to Macmillan Publishing. Now let me introduce Michelle Meow, the host and producer of the Michelle Meow Show, as well as a member of the Commonwealth Club's Board of Governors. Hello, Michelle.
Hello, everyone, and hello, John, and thank you so much. If you're meeting me for the first time, the Michelle Meow Show is your A through Z covering the LGBT, LMNOP, and everyone in between. Our special guest tonight doesn't need much of an intro, although I'll add a couple fun facts about him. He drives a hybrid minivan.
True.
And is a doting dad to twins and an extremely supportive husband. I mean, his marriage is still intact after his husband, supporting his husband who ran for the toughest job in the United States. He's an educator, he's an advocate, he's here to share something, to tell you something with his new book well, I guess, not new, but the second edition to his memoir for young adults tonight. And we'll find out why there is even such a version for young adults. He is Chasten Buttigieg. Yeah. Before we get into the discussion, though, we actually have a surprise. So back to you, John.
Yes, so today is not just the launch of this book tour, it is also in San Francisco, officially Chasten Buttigieg Day.
What?
Yep.
What?
This is the proclamation by Mayor London Breed.
Oh my gosh.
It's got a lot of words on it. She
There's
apparently
not
gets
much
very
time.
wordy. London Breed gets very wordy when she's praising people she likes. But,
Oh my gosh.
suffice it to say, praises you and your work,
Wow,
especially your work for
thank you.
LGBT people, as well as understanding and helping young people. And we are thrilled to have you here on Chasten Buttigieg Day.
Wow, thank you so much. Whoa, how incredible.
Okay, wait. Hold it up really nice, and yes. I'm being the
Wow.
teacher now, and we have Sarah here who's taking professional photos.
And we should point out, happy Chasten Buttigieg Day for all who
For
celebrate.
everyone, yeah. For all who celebrate, yeah.
Yeah, on Chasten Buttigieg Day Eve, I was just so excited, anticipating this whole program.
How lovely. I'm reading the small print just in case it comes with, power.
Just kidding.
If there's
Give everyone
spelling
free Chipotle
errors,
today or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
How cool.
Isn't it?
Wow.
Yeah.
How flattering. Great. Well, thanks for coming, everyone. It's so.
Next year on this day, we'll all have T-shirts that says it's Chasten Buttigieg Day here at the
Absolutely
Commonwealth
incredible.
Club. Well, let's get started. Okay, so we mentioned that this is the young adult version that is coming out, and so not very many people write memoirs thinking about it in this way, where you would write a memoir for a certain set of folks, and then
Yeah.
especially for young adults. So tell us why you decided that there needed to be a version for young adults.
Yeah, the first book is absolutely accessible, I think, for high school students and even some more mature middle schoolers. This is the book that I wish I would have had in middle school. So I completely gutted the book, I rewrote it, infusing a lot more of adolescence stories throughout my childhood and how this scared, closeted, terrified young man, in rural conservative Michigan grew up to be this very proud, open advocate and well-known person who wants to use that platform to do good. And there's so much in there that I wish I just could have heard as a young person. We did not talk about gay people growing up in rural conservative Michigan. I thought I was the only gay person in the world. And so much of this book is that gentle hand on the shoulder to remind young people that you are okay, just the way you are. There's nothing wrong with you. And there will be heartbreak and there will be pain, but you will learn from it, you'll grow from it. And so there's some of that, trauma in there. And then there's all the goodness that came from learning to love myself along the way.
So we don't want you to obviously have to tell the whole story of that's in the book, but
Yeah.
take us back and give us a setting, if you will, of growing up in Michigan, where you were, your family life, what your family was like, and how that helped form you.
My family was very insular. My dad owns a small landscaping company, very well known in our community. My mom worked shifts at the hospital and ran the family business. We spent most of our time outdoors. I was a 4-H kid, so I started with goats and worked my way up to cattle. My parents really prided themselves with hard work, hands-on work, athletics, extracurricular activities, and we were always together. We're always doing something. But I write in the book about how I felt like in order to be successful, I had to pretend to be one type of person. And so that was the, roughneck, outdoorsy, farm kid. If you were a good Christian boy, then, you were a very certain type of good Christian boy. And I spent so much time focusing on playing all of those roles and trying to fit in and blend in because I was afraid that people would find out that secret about me. So I really did lean in on the 4-H. Some of those pictures are traumatizing. The denim on denim with, like the big Stetson and the belt buckles, and was just so terrified that if anyone found out, that I would lose everything. And so I just threw myself in all those extracurriculars. But my family really was a very, very loving family. I was just so worried that if they found out that secret about me, that I would lose them.
It's interesting here on the show, we actually do open up with our guests sharing a coming out story, however you identify, whether on the LGBTQIA plus spectrum or not. I feel like if we opened up with that, we would just go through the entire book. And so, very many different ways of coming out and to different people in your life at different points and times. But the story of coming out with your family, obviously, is a big deal. You had already come out to yourself, some friends, even an ex-girlfriend. Mm-hmm. But coming out to your family is a story. Can we start with that?
Yeah. I was an exchange student my senior year in high school, and I had learned about this scholarship to study abroad in Germany and threw myself at it because it was my ticket out of Michigan. And I wanted to get as far away from everyone as possible. And it was that year in Germany that was so formative for me, and really truly leaned into my identity and realized that I was indeed gay. And when I came home with all that confidence. but then I came home to all the same people that I had left.
Tell, if you would, the conversation with the German woman who basically said, you know,
Oh yeah, I made this great friend in Germany. Her name is Franzi. We're still friends today. And I had this girlfriend in Germany. I felt terrible because there was nothing romantic about it. And I felt awful. And I told her, I feel terrible because I know I'm hurting somebody else. And this thing is eating me inside. And I think I might be bisexual. And she was like, you can also be gay. And it's like, it was so matter of fact,
Yeah.
and from a very loving place. It's like, there's nothing wrong with being gay. You don't have to pretend to be somebody that you're not. And I had never had someone say that to me in my life. Something so profound and yet something so simple. And I just broke down. I was like, I think that's true, and I know that, you know, my family's going to hate me, and I'm going to lose all my friends, and what happens when I go home? And so she helped me lean into my identity and at least feel comfortable saying it out loud. I didn't know what it meant beyond that. And then I came home, and I didn't last very long. It was just eating me inside that all of these people didn't know this thing about me. And I should say that I was under the assumption that you had to share that information, that, you know, you couldn't keep it a secret, that it was your responsibility as a queer person to, you know, come out to everyone, which is totally bogus. You don't have to do that. And then I was just convinced that I would lose them, that my family would be so embarrassed of me and mad at me. So I wrote a letter. I handed it to my mom, and I said, I'm so sorry, and I left. And I had already packed my bags, and I went to a friend's house and spent the next couple months couch surfing and occasionally sleeping in my car, and had no idea what to do next. But it's important to point out that that story ended in a really good way. My parents had no idea what it was like to raise a gay son. We never talked about gay people. But the thing that they cared more about was keeping me alive. And I think they knew how much I was hurting and how dark of a place I was in. And my mom called me one day, and she just said, you need to come home, and we'll figure it out. Just come home and we'll figure it out. And I drove right to my parents' house and just collapsed in my mom's arms. And my mom is home watching my kids right now. My parents are our biggest allies. They put love and family above all of that fear. And asked all the wrong questions and the right questions, and we had the hard conversations, and they're the reason I'm here today.
Had you not gone to Germany, do you think you would have come out around the same time? Do you think it was building up in you enough that you were about to burst that dam anyway soon?
No.
Or really?
No, I was in a pretty bad spot. I think it was just, who knows, luck, kismet, but I think thank God all of those things lined up, because I hated myself in high school. I mean, I was so mad at this person.
You hated your life, or you hated yourself?
Well, kind of both, but I didn't know that it was okay to be myself.
Yeah.
I didn't know that it was okay to be gay. So I could not see more than 2 steps in front of me. And I don't know what would have happened had I stuck around, because I was just in such a dark place pretending to be somebody that I wasn't. And I'm so glad I got that experience of, you know, getting out of that bubble, making friends, seeing the world, and thank God, you know, meeting people who allowed me to come out with all that confidence to go back home. I mean, it was messy and it was rocky, and I'm just so grateful that it lined up that way, because I don't know what would have happened to that kid.
We talk a lot about the importance of coming out, but not in this way in which you said, where you have to feel forced that you have to share with everybody in your life that you're an LGBTQIA plus identified person. But at the same time, the importance of the folks around you that create that safe space. So now that you're a parent,
Yeah.
also an educator and an advocate, and have had these experiences that many of us won't have, being in the news and I don't know, this thing, experiences of being a spouse of somebody who ran for president of the United States. And so
It's not all
of course it's
glamorous.
I guess, what would you say to a young Chasten these days so that they don't fall into that place where one day they say, I hated my life, I hated who I was?
Yeah, the whole epilogue is a conversation with young me. And I just wish that that kid would have known that he was so cool. I was so funny and creative and energetic and inventive, and I was writing the plays in the basement, like who wasn't? And like all the signs were there, but I was a cool kid, but I was so wrapped up in the opinions of other people, and I was so busy worrying about meeting all of their expectations that I didn't realize that I was pretty cool. That being creative is cool, that being academically gifted is cool. I just wish that kid would have known, don't pay attention to all of these people, because one day you will forget that they exist. I ran into people from high school in Target back home. I have no idea what their name is. And not I don't mean that as an insult to them, but like I remember at one point in my life, I was so worried about what that person thought of me, And that's what I write to young Chasten. It's like, just focus on all of the things that make you different and beautiful, because when you lean into those differences, that's where you unleash your true power. There's power in difference and power in leaning into all of the things that make you different from everybody else.
And you invented the digital Post-it notes of today. It's from Romy and Michelle's high school reunion. Oh. They invented Post-it notes. They made that up to be cool. Anyway.
That's pretty cool.
Sorry, showing my age, 90s kid. John.
Well,
I feel like that makes me, anytime I don't know a 90s reference, like, was I sheltered? Probably.
You were a 4-H kid. I forget.
Yeah, I was busy mucking the barn, I guess.
It should be pointed out, he was a good 4-H kid. You were successful at it.
Well, yeah, this is a phenomenon that happens for a lot of queer people, right? To distract other people from this thing that you're so worried about, that we try to excel at everything that we do, so outperform everybody else. So I really leaned in on the 4-H. I went to the showmanship classes and thought like the best way to distract everyone from this like effeminate kid in Wranglers is to win the blue ribbons. And if I win the blue ribbons, at least I'm impressive. And they'll talk about that, not the fact that, there might be something else going on there.
Well, it's just being a teenager, regardless of what your sexuality or your identity is a very fraught time, because every one of them, even the popular kids, they're dealing with self-doubt, they're dealing with worries, they're dealing with family issues, they're dealing with that separation as they kind of become their own person, separation from their parents. So then when you layer on this, like you said, this discovering you're different, there's that, and then will the reaction to that be positive or negative?
Yeah.
So you talked a bit about your conversation to yourself, what you'd want to reassure your younger self at the time. Would you have recommended that your middle school or high school self come out, or would you have said that's not a safe place yet for you?
Oh, it was absolutely unsafe to be out.
Really?
At that time, in that place. I grew up in the era of Matthew Shepard. Growing up in rural conservative Michigan, that Matthew Shepard told me that if you come out, you'll die. And I was so terrified of that. And I learned that from such a young age. I was barely 10 and just starting to grapple with some of the things that were going on in my head, and just starting to find the vocabulary for it. And the way I was finding that vocabulary was by people telling me that that was bad. So it was like, well, if this thing is true, then you might die. You might get bullied. You might get, really bad things could happen to you. So, if, in the pretend scenario, if I went back in time, I would definitely tell that kid to probably stay in the closet. And that's really sad, because the world just wasn't ready you know? And I don't know, it's a fraught one, because you want every kid to be their truest self. But the problem with asking and telling kids, even with a book like this and today, even with that, is it's hard to say, be yourself, lean into everything that makes you different, come out, bust down the door, right? Because it's not safe for everybody to do that still. So I also talk about how safety is the most important thing, and to know that there are still people out here backing you up who believe in you. And if you feel defined by your surroundings, you know, the world around you is telling you that you don't fit, and you feel unsafe, your safety has to come first, but know that there's a wider world out here waiting to support you.
That's why I really sincerely have to thank you for the young adult version of your memoir. It's so important that we have mentorship. Good segue to bullying. You had talked about being bullied all your life,
Yeah.
right? And even till this very moment in time. And, you know, the big question that I have for you right now, I think as of April 2023, there are over 400 anti-LGBTQIA plus bills that are being passed here in the United States. And a lot of these states are focused in the Midwest, and states like Kentucky, Tennessee, and also, you know, Florida. Hello. Yeah. Talk to us about how you handle bullying this day. And this, in my opinion at least, this is the most aggressive form of bullying ever.
Yeah.
It's a point of a human rights violation, in my opinion, with these laws that are being passed that are focused on LGBTQIA plus youths, bathroom bills,
Yeah.
books being stripped away, you know, in the school or classrooms, preventing kids from learning about lived experiences and history and LGBTQIA plus people.
That's a very lighthearted question. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
You know, to young people, I always just want to apologize on behalf of the adults that we hold young people to such higher standards than elected officials. So I often think about if some of these Congress members were in my classroom, how I would have responded as a teacher. I mean, the things that they get away with saying and doing, the behavior that is now just expected of elected officials is disgusting. And we hold 8th graders to higher standards of decorum and empathy, you know? So to the young people, I say, I'm sorry, but know that there are really good people trying to do the right thing. And unfortunately, in our media ecosystem, on the news and social media, you often only hear about the worst actors. So there are over 400 members of the House of Representatives, right? And we typically only hear about a handful of them because they're out there acting like cartoon characters. And there are, 400 other people who are just trying to roll up their sleeves and do good work. And I think so much of this anti-LGBTQ nonsense is void of humanity and purpose. It just works for them. So the thing that's more important to them is finding something that they can get the 3 C's out of: clout, clicks, and cash. You want to get on late night TV? Go out there and say something mean about LGBTQ people. You want to get clicks on that really crazy thing you said on the floor of the House? Say something about LGBTQ people. And if you want to fundraise, you want to raise money from your base, right now, it's LGBTQ people. So they're not focused on making your life better, but they're also not focused on making anybody's life better. There are hundreds of things we could be working on right now. And rather than working on anything, they are doing something that gets them those 3 things. And it's disgusting, because you would think if you were elected to a position of power and you are tasked with going to Washington and doing the right thing to improve people's lives, make life easier, not harder, and the thing you do in Washington is just pick on vulnerable kids, how do you sleep at night? That's the thing that bothers me the most, is you're talking about really vulnerable young people. Middle school is hard already. And now we have adults who have decided that they can make money and get attention off of really vulnerable young people. So to young people, because I see some of you in the audience, I say I'm sorry, but we're working on it. There are really good people. So the thing we can all do is surround ourselves with good people who remind you of your worth, remind you that you are loved, you're perfect just the way that you are, and who jump into the good fight because it matters. I know we're all tired, but now is a season of active allyship. And that means doing more than posting on social media. It means you might have to start going to your school board meetings. I know. City council meetings, you might have to join your local chapter of PFLAG. If you're a teacher, you might have to start doing some more research on the resources that are put out, from the Trevor Project or GLSEN, but surround yourself with good people who remind you why we're all in this fight. And then I think it starts to get a little bit easier when you're reminded daily of what matters, because a lot of people on television and in Washington right now are talking about all the things that don't matter.
There's the words that are being said in Washington and elsewhere that are hurtful and damaging and threatening. Then there are actual laws being passed. And I want to focus a bit on Florida's various Don't Say Gay initiatives, and then they double down on that and further. You mentioned teachers. I mean, they're targeted in some of this.
Absolutely.
What can they do? I mean, when they're in a state that probably is not likely to flip, so they're going to deal with this atmosphere at least for a while.
Yeah.
What suggestions would you have for?
Yeah, it's hard to sit up here and just say, do the right thing when you're trying to keep your job. And the thing about Florida is you hear daily stories of people asking their representatives in their government to do right by all of the crises that their state is facing. And this is what we're focused on. But like I said earlier, safety is always the number one thing. Here's the thing, I'll back up a little bit. I don't know how some people don't respect teachers more. The fact, if your kid has a teacher, you're so lucky. The fact that teachers aren't leaving that profession in droves right now highlights just how incredible teachers are. And not only are they incredible people, I believe if you're a teacher, you're like born with some, special part of your DNA that just says like, sign me up to teach middle school kids, for no money, right? Teachers are just incredible people, but not only are they born with this gift of being some of the best people, they're also highly trained and educated individuals. So some of these conversations about education, again, are removed from reality. Yeah. If I have a question about a book and whether it is age appropriate or not, do you know who I'm going to ask about that? The librarian, the teacher, not Marjorie Taylor Greene. If I have a question about whether something is appropriate for my child or whether, we're meeting state education standards, I'm going to turn to the teacher, the person who went to school, who does the work, who shows up day in and day out to teach the next generation of American citizens. And so again, this conversation is so void of reality, but it's so good for them. The fear that they can infuse into the conversation, this boogeyman, that's not happening. And the conversation about, parental rights just boggles my mind. Are there any teachers in the audience tonight? Thank you so much for your service. How many times, yes, thank you. Can't tell you how many times I've done parent-teacher conferences and like 2 parents come. So you want to talk about like parents having a voice and showing up, in education. I think any teacher would say, yes, please, parents be involved, because I only get your kid for 6 hours a day. I'll get off my soapbox. I realize where the clock is ticking, but I think so many of these conversations are just void of that reality. These problems aren't happening. And you see sometimes where these people are put on the spot, say, give me an example. Yeah. And they don't have one, but it's easier for them. That's the thing. Being big-hearted and approaching public service with empathy and trying to do the right thing, rolling up your sleeves and doing the hard work, it's hard work for a reason. So the easier work for them is to just go on the attack, because they don't have to do anything. They just have to go on television and say mean things. And that's really sad.
What about parents? I mean, your thoughts on how we have conversations with parents. I think that this old page out of the playbook of let's attack, children, or let's go after or create the fear around our children, put parents in really hard places.
Yeah.
And today, I think we need way more education on gender identity, gender, expansive identities, and diversity around that, right? But we don't have all those resources, especially in Northern Michigan.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on how maybe parents can articulate this to themselves and their communities, their peers.
Yeah. One of the things that irks me is when I see people say, like, nobody was coming out like this when, I was younger. It's like, yeah, because we were all in the closet and terrified and miserable. And the fact that, like, young people are coming out and the fact that they're able to have more language about their identity is fantastic. And the problem is it was getting better, and now people are so committed to making it worse. And it's actually a pretty cool thing when someone can find the language to be their authentic self and then go on with the rest of their life, rather than the alternative. And I don't have to tell you some of that data that the Trevor Project puts out about mental health amongst LGBTQ people. But parenting is one of the greatest things I think you can do. Of course, it's not for everybody, but if you want to be a parent, it's like one of the best jobs it is the best job I've ever had. And it's not a small thing. It's actually a great act of resistance, because you get to raise somebody to value other people. You get to teach your kid that it's actually pretty cool to be loving of other people, that everyone gets a seat at the table, and that our worldview should be wider and not narrower. And I'm so happy that I get to raise my kids in a home that I wish I would have had when I was younger. I love my parents, but we didn't have some of that progress in my home when I was growing up. But it's pretty cool to watch my mom now following in my footsteps, because we know that we want Gus and Penelope to grow up in a home and in a world that values other people and just values the ideas of love and empathy and community. And that, to me, is a reminder of the good work that we all can do individually. Because if you look at, like, solving world peace by yourself, it's a pretty big box to check. But if you start breaking down all these goals that you have, bring it down to little things that you can do every day. So one of the things that is so hard when you're a public person is, like, I can't make it better every day. And you get some of that vulnerability fatigue that you, carry on your shoulders. Like, I wish I could just make it better and easier. But the thing that I can do today is be a really good dad. And when I was in the classrooms, I can be a really good teacher. And I still hear from some of my former students, and it always reminds me that they'll tell me a story I don't even remember. But one day, I did one thing that made a huge impact on them. I'm still hearing about it 5 years later. So you can do little things along the way. Be a really great teacher. Be a really great whatever it is you are. Make sure that you're making people feel seen and welcome at every table that you're sitting at. And for parents, that, it's what a cool thing that we get to do. We get to create the world, at least in our home, that we wish we could have had when we were younger.
We have a lot of great questions from the audience. Let's try to get to some of these.
All right, I'll stop talking.
No. Yeah, this is what we came for. This person writes, Mr. Chasten Buttigieg, as president of the Gender Sexuality Alliance, I wanted to ask you, when did you start to question your sexuality, and when did you realize you were gay? This is from Gigi, grade 6, French American.
Awesome. I think it was probably around 5th grade that I started to realize something was amiss. But I didn't have the language for it, but I definitely was aware enough to know that I wasn't like the other boys. Did I answer the full question? Was there?
I guess when did you put two and two together and realize you just weren't different, but actually, yeah, you're gay?
Yeah, so it was like, there was so much denial. Yeah, probably like 5th to 7th grade, it was like confirmed. But again, I was growing up in a time and in a place where I wasn't sure if that was real. So, I didn't know that it was a thing that you could be safely and happily. So I just thought something was wrong with me. So yeah, I don't know if that's like a full answer to the question, but I think I had like found the vocabulary then, like, oh, this thing that they're saying exists is the way that I'm feeling. But the way that I was brought aware of it was in a way that I just thought that something was wrong. Does that make sense?
Like when Dan Savage tells a story when he realized it and there was other people talking about, these weird gay men who were kissing each other or whatever, and he said, oh, I'm weird like they're weird.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was discovering. But I think like at that point I thought that there was something that you could do. You could like write the course, and no jeans and cows were gonna fix that. Yeah.
We're going to keep going with questions?
Sure.
Yeah.
So in the book, you actually start off talking about working at Starbucks, and then you revisit that later on. So this ties it all together. Years ago, I heard a story from a guy who worked at a Starbucks in Wisconsin.
Oh, no.
He told me about a technique of resistance that staff would do when customers were rude.
Oh, God.
We'd decaf them, he said. As part of your coming out, do you think you found quiet forms of protest or resistance? Is there a queer version of decaffing?
I was so nervous that like one of my former peers was here from Starbucks, and they're like calling me out for it. I also learned that when I worked at Starbucks. Should be really careful with the person who's making your morning coffee. All it takes is just a separate button to change your morning. That's funny. I'm not saying I did it. A decaffing for queer people. I love it.
There's a mystery series written by now a dead German writer about this Turkish-German private eye. I think it's Kayan Kaya. If you've ever read, they're hilarious and great. The thing is, he's always running up against people who are insulting him, whether directly or kind of obliquely because he's Turkish. And so every time he does that, like if they're a customer and they make some slight, he's just like, okay, he's doubling what he's going to charge them. Well,
yeah, I guess, one of the best things someone ever told me that I picked up from somebody else was, this was particularly helpful at Starbucks, and then when I worked with some other teachers who were frustrating. And rather than saying the thing that you want to say, you can always just say, have the day you deserve. And so sometimes, there are these like corner preachers in Capitol Hill. They just espouse so much hatred and homophobia, and I've used that one a couple times. You're just telling them to have the day that they deserve.
Let's do one more, and then I'll throw it back to Michelle.
All right.
Someone writes, LGBTQIA+ books are suddenly controversial. Do you anticipate yours being banned for the same nonsense reasons? And did you have that in mind when writing the book?
No, I started writing it over 2 years ago, and we weren't talking about book bans 2 years ago. So I'm surprised that it's coming out now. I taught middle school. I wrote a completely age-appropriate book. So if it is banned, it's just politics. But like we talked about earlier, so much of that is void from reality. So I'm, under no illusion of what might happen. But all the more reason to make sure that people have access to it.
I'm just flipping the pages to look for something that they could ban. I'll read very quickly, though. I mean, I just happened to flip to page 90. You're different is a pretty common excuse for kids to pick on one another. Yeah, so what? We're all different. That's a good thing. But hearing you're not a real man or God hates you hurt me much worse. It's kind of perfect that I flipped to that page. Just my question to you today is just, sharing some of your lived experiences of what you see, you hear people say to you that hurt you. And if you read everything, every comment online,
Yeah.
or do you ignore it?
I mean, now I'm grown up, and I built some thick armor. When I was that kid, I had no armor. It was like your heart's on the outside of your chest, and all it took was a mean look in the hallway, and you'd start thinking about it for the rest of the day, So, of course, there's nonsense out there, and there's a lot of noise. There's also a lot of bot farms. So usually if someone's account is like the picture of a cat smoking a cigar and the username is like 48 characters, it's like, I don't think you're a real person. I don't think your opinion matters. But the thing that we get to decide is how much weight we assign to the things that other people say. And so I try to go through life without accepting the opinions or advice of other people that I didn't ask it from. And I love my husband, I love my family, I love who I get to be today. I know who I am. I know what my mission is. I know what I stand for. When I was younger, I didn't. And so now, when you come face to face with some of that stuff, you get to grow up and be the person who gets to tell them to have the day that they deserve.
It's a T-shirt somewhere someday on this stage, I'm sure.
Oh, we should have brought merch.
Yeah.
So when your kids get old enough, and assuming the universe online is much the same, what's your approach going to be for social media for them? Can you protect them from it? Can you inoculate them from it? Can you decaf them from it?
I don't know. It terrifies me. Because great things can come from social media. But also really bad things can come from social media. Some of the biggest headaches I ever had as a teacher came from social media. I don't know, I'm scared because I think social media has a way of highlighting all of the things that remind us of how we're being measured up against other people. So I want, my kids one day to find community and connection and humor from social media. I mean, I like TikTok videos too. I'm not allowed to be on TikTok, so I'm a millennial. I wait for them to filter down to Instagram, and then I can see them. But we all enjoy social media in some aspect. But then I worry about my daughter logging onto social media and having the world, remind her that there are really ridiculous standards for her to meet, and that worries me. But I think the thing that we can do, so the thing that I could do as a teacher, the thing you can do as a parent, is make sure that your kid feels comfortable coming to you and talking to you, whether there's a problem or whether they have questions or whether they're afraid or whether somebody made them feel, in a negative way. And that's such a gift when a kid comes to you and asks for help or is scared or is concerned. So if one of my middle schoolers came to me and said, this thing happened and I don't know how to feel about it, that told me that I was a person that was trusted. And I think if your kid comes to you, that's actually a great sign of your parenting skills. And so let's just work to make sure that we establish that trust and those boundaries and go from there.
Aside from LGBTQIA+ issues, as a parent, as an educator, as a citizen of this country, as a voter, what are some things that you are deeply thinking about? What are some issues that you're concerned of? We'll be here all night.
It's such a heavy one. I certainly now have a deeper appreciation for parents now that I am one. And for any parent in the room, once you become a parent, it is like your heart's on the outside of your chest. And I'm just so worried about the world that we're building and that we're going to leave for our kids. Before kids, I was just like barreling through life, a lot of care in the world. And now I like cry when I get on an airplane, like leave my kids. I hear the ticking of the clock in the back of my head. Like the future is coming. And like your kids are growing up and they just like every day they're older and older. And I'm like so worried that I can't fix it all before they start asking questions. So it's just everything. But the thing I was talking about earlier is when you get overwhelmed by that and it seems like you can't solve anything, then you start breaking it down to the little things that you can solve. But man, climate, equality, those are really, really big things and you can't tackle them on your own. So I focus on the things that I can do as a dad. But I'm sure any parent can relate to the fear of just not having done enough. So
A couple of questions that are similar, so I'll merge them together. And that
Okay.
is, do you think your and your husband's expressions of gender has impacted or affected your popularity among the general populace and the reaction you get? And I think the answer is probably, well, yes. But maybe how, if yes?
interesting. Our expression of gender.
Maybe the fact that you're open about it, the way you act with each other in public.
Like the fact I'm open about being a man?
Okay. Yes.
yes.
Or you mean being a gay man?
I assume they meant,
I'm going to go with being a gay.
we can get into gender politics
Yeah.
of a whole different types. I don't think we wanted to.
Well, certainly some folks on the right they blur their lines between gender and sexuality and identity. They can't figure out what they don't like, so they just don't like anything. So one thing that was hard for me in the beginning of being a public person, because it happened so fast, was this sense that I needed to be perfect all the time. And in pursuit of that perfection, I started forgetting who I was. And I eventually got to the point where I felt like unless I just decide to be exactly who I am, it'll just crush me. So I just leaned into everything. And when my husband was on the campaign trail, I just started opening up about all of these things that I felt like I had to keep locked up inside. And I discovered that when you're more vulnerable, you allow other people to see themselves in your story. And there's great strength in vulnerability. So I talked about a lot of that stuff, running away from home. And so many people had shared slivers of life. You connect with people about that. Because you opened up, because you told your story, somebody else got to feel seen. And the thing about being an openly gay couple, I feel some of that similar pressure, but the thing that I can do is just be myself. And I don't want to be everything for everyone, because I want there to be more representation. I want people to see themselves in more than just one couple. So I can only be myself. But the thing that comes with that privilege of having a platform, having a microphone, getting to go on the news and talk about things that you care about, is that you also get to uplift the stories and experiences and existences of other people. So for me as an advocate, when I was on the campaign trail, and now just out here as author advocate, I make it a point to, as your teacher said, put your listening ears on and do as much listening as I can and learning from other people as I can. So maybe I won't be, the best example for everybody, or maybe I won't be everything for everyone. And that's okay. But it's important for me to just live my life authentically. So I, love my husband. I love being a dad, go to the playground. Surely you're conscious of your two dads at the playground. with a kid. But the thing I just keep reminding myself is like, you're here for a reason. And just lean into that purpose.
I want to follow up on that.
Yeah.
Something you and your husband are both known for and praised for is your clear communications of what you believe and your ability to convince people in this horribly polarized society. Not that you convince everyone who hears you, but I mean, seeing your husband go on, some news channel where they think he might not have a friendly reception, but he's great at communicating what he says and reframing things that makes people say, yeah, okay, I understand that. And you too, you make it look easy, and I guess, do you spend a lot of time with that, focusing on that, training yourself on that, or does that come naturally to you, the way you communicate?
Well, I was a theater kid, so I've got that going on. I think we have a shared sense of like a mission and a purpose for being public people, and that is finding the humanity in all of it. What I was trying to get at with being your authentic self versus like pretending to be someone else, like I couldn't sit up here in a room full of people with like talking points, because it would just eat me up, just pretending to be somebody that I'm not. And I think at the root of all that we do, whether you're running for president, or it's Chasten Buttigieg Day, is just finding the humanity in all of it. So that I can't speak about everything because I'm not, an expert in everything, but I am an expert in my story and my existence and my purpose. And I think that breaking things down and bringing it back down to our shared experiences, whether it's a parent, a public servant, a teacher, we all have these shared experiences. And I think so much of the noise machine, like we were talking about earlier with the anti-LGBTQ bills, it's like void of empathy, and it's void of existence and reality. And so I just want to focus on like the things that I can talk about and try to find shared experiences along the way. And some of that just comes with time. He makes it look a lot easier than I think it is sometimes.
Well, and there are politicians in particular who have been around for decades who could very well be speaking from the heart, but they sound like, because they've been so trained that they sound like they are reading talking points.
Yeah.
And
I don't want to make like generalizations, but I think for me, I just find great purpose in what I'm doing. And I think for some people, it just becomes like all they have. Like the power is all they have. And then it starts to become like their purpose is to be in that position of power. That's where they get their purpose from. And for me, I just feel like, at least right now, writing this book and using this platform and going on book tour and talking about these things, like I know what my mission is. And I think some people have lost that.
I know a person or two, on the whole power trip thing, and we'll talk about that another time. We talked about how you've dealt with bullying and how you've dealt with some of the stuff that's going on now, the comments that you get. But what about the stories or the responses from people that both you and your husband have changed their lives or their views? Can you share maybe some of the most memorable ones?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I feel like we've talked about so many heavy things, and this is the first book tour stop. So I'm starting to think that we might need like a 7th inning stretch along the book tour. Like if anyone just needs to like wiggle it out and laugh or something, I'll try to be more lighthearted. So I might just be in my own head about it, but I hope my trauma isn't bumming you out. That is one of the coolest things that happens in my life. And it always sneaks up and surprises me. When I was talking about breaking things down to things that you can control. And you write a book and it goes out into the world and you kind of forget about it. And then somebody comes up to you in like the produce section at Trader Joe's and like they're already in tears.
Oh.
And they can't find the words, and they're telling you about what it meant to them to see you wherever you were, on the cover of a magazine or on the news, or just the fact that you exist. And it just blows me out of the water every time. 'Cause, you just keep trucking along with life, trying to do the right thing, and you forget that sometimes your existence in of itself means something to somebody. And that's really, really cool. And meeting parents, especially, who are fans of mine, my parents, that they've learned the story of my parents who called their kid back home, who, fumbled and just wanted to do the right thing. And I've met people who just say, I'm such a big fan of your mom. And it's really, really cool to know that it means something. It's one of the best things to know that, like, that scared kid had no idea that he would get to be this person one day. It's pretty cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
Remind me again, Terry and Sharon. Sherry.
Yeah.
Terry and Sherry, thank you for this really cool person here. Hope you're tuning in.
Thank you.
A comment from someone, your voice and story is so needed to be heard in the San Joaquin Central Valley. Please come see us. So add that
great.
to your list. And then a question that actually is right along the lines of what you were just talking about. After you came out, how did your family deal with the community? I mean, were there any less open-minded relatives that they needed to communicate with, or any problems that they dealt with?
No, the biggest thing was, like, don't tell grandma. It'll kill her. But literally. So, months go by after coming out. You're just trying to figure it out. It's like the elephant in the room. I'm back home, but we're, like, not really talking about it. And it's like, just whatever you do, don't tell grandma. And then that started eating me up, because this person I loved so much, I felt like I wanted her to know. And I think I wanted to know that she loved me. And I was so afraid of that. And I think it was Thanksgiving. And I asked Grandma to go for a walk with me. And it's one of my favorite stories in the book. It was one of the hardest stories to write in the book. I was just so nervous that this powerhouse of a woman was going to hate me.
Very religious woman.
Very religious woman. As I was coming out to her, I was, like, watching the rosary dangle in her car. We made our way to her Buick LeSabre, and this is great backup music for this story. Thank you so much.
Might be a good reminder to please silence your phones.
Can we get some steam for the coming out story? And I couldn't even find the words. I got out, like, grandma, and it just broke down, and she just grabbed my arm and she said, I know, and I love you just the same. And it was so cool that I got to keep her around, and yeah.
You also
Really
include a story in the book that she did attend your wedding.
She did. Her lungs were failing her at the end of her life, and she was determined to make it to that wedding. So she had the oxygen tank on and walked down the aisle. She read the gospel, and there was something about her voice that just, it was so cool. Like, we were talking about, like, the simplest things that you can do for other people, and I just knew that at the end of her life, she had this full circle moment, and then she passed a couple weeks after our wedding. And it was just spectacular that she was there. And there was so much closure in that moment for me. All these people I was so afraid of hurting and losing. And then they're at your wedding, so great.
Well, love you, Grandma.
Yeah, she's probably, like, playing bingo up there, looking down and probably really proud. So, yeah.
You spent so much of your youth, young adulthood, just dying to get out of your hometown in Michigan.
Yeah.
You now live in Michigan again. What drew you back to that state?
It's in my blood. I want to be part of change, and I feel like Traverse City itself is experiencing this renaissance, and I just want to be part of it. I've been lucky to travel the world and go different places, and I'm also just like deeply Midwestern. I just have to be in the Midwest. I went to one of your restaurants last night and asked for ranch, and they offered me truffle aioli, and I don't know what that is. Like, absolutely not. No. So I love the Midwest. And seeing the progress that has happened in my hometown is incredible. There was a sticker when I was younger that was a rainbow. It was like puzzle pieces of a rainbow, like holding hand, like puzzle people holding graphic design in the 90s. And it just had a rainbow on it. And they wanted to put it on all the city. They put it on all the city vehicles, and it said, "We are Traverse City." And those stickers got ripped off of all those city vehicles within weeks because the homophobic backlash was so strong. Another thing that told me as a young person, like, don't stick your neck out. Pride in Traverse City is like incredible. Painted crosswalks, pride flags down Main Street, Front Street, got a Traverse City cred. So cool. It's just the Pride March that I attended with my family in Traverse City was the coolest Pride March I've ever been to. No corporate sponsorships, just thousands of people marching through the street demanding visibility and equality, and I got to do that holding my mom's hand. It was like, I want to be here. I want to be part of this change, and we can all, find ways to be part of the change. So for me, it was a no-brainer to go back to Michigan. I just had to convince the other half to. So.
And they serve ranch. Yeah, during Pride.
Buckets of ranch. All the ranch dressing and, cheese curds and cherry pie you could want. I said that because I know you're from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
No animosity.
There are literally stores that sell nothing but cheese curds.
Yeah.
I wish I were kidding.
It's not a real cheese curd if it doesn't squeak. Right? Am I right?
Yeah.
Anybody else from Wisconsin? Sorry. It's a truffle aioli city.
Truffle garlic aioli. All right. You talk a lot about these, you actually were featured in commercials, wanted to act, you were really into, you mentioned it a couple times, loving Broadway. I mean,
Yeah.
could it be next?
Broadway?
No, well, sure.
Put that music back on.
Yeah. We were going to give you the opportunity. I mean, the stage is quite small. It's not, but if you wanted to try here.
Do Rose's turn from Gypsy right now for everyone? I don't know what's next. I've been working on a children's book, one that I, wish I had for Gus and Penelope. There aren't a lot of children's books with two dads in them. So that's been a fun little side project.
And if you did the same thing, that would be cool because then you'd have the original children's book. And like with this one, you could do the young adults version for older children.
Look at that. Yeah. I like it. Who knows? But what a gift to have the opportunity to think about what's next.
Yeah. I have one last question, and then I'll throw it back to John for his last question to wind down our talk. And that is, it's a two-part question. Maybe.
Sure.
During the presidential campaign, it was exciting for me to think about, one, there would be a different way of describing first man, husband, what would
First
you have
gentleman.
been? First gentleman, thank you. That's what you would be called, right? Yeah. And then thinking about what you would be wearing during the inauguration. But this really is just a question if you think that we will have an openly LGBTQIA plus president in our future someday.
Why not? Why not? Yeah. One of the funniest interviews I've ever seen my husband do is someone asked him that question, and he said, we might have already had one. And excuse me. And the interviewer said, "Do you really think we've already?" Like, he was so serious, and Pete said, my gaydar doesn't work that well in the present. I don't think it works, retroactively, whatever. He's so much more eloquent with his jokes, but why not? If we all keep working towards, equality and keep telling the right stories. And the thing I love about Pete, stay focused on the work, do the right thing, and we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Someone from the audience asks, do you miss anything about your life from before you became national figures?
Oh, just, blending in. You could go to Target in sweatpants, no one cares. Sometimes I have to get dressed up to go out. I just know people, will see you, and I just don't look good in the right out of bed look, and some celebrities are get photographed. And they're like, gosh, they can do anything. And I got to do my hair before I go to Starbucks or something. So blending in would be nice sometimes, just to walk through life, never worrying about whether someone was taking a picture of you or following you or, recording you. That's nice, but there are so many great benefits that come from having a platform. So I don't think I'd trade it. I really like that I got to grow up to be this person and turn around and think about what I want to give back and how I can use that, for good. It's been pretty great. So I'll take the weird photos and it's a pretty good trade-off, I think.
Thanks. Michelle?
Chasten Buttigieg, thank you so much for sharing everything that you wanted to tell us tonight.
Thank you so much.
And so, reminder to some of you, the educators and students who are here, pick up your complimentary copy. Thank you so much, Chasten, and thank you to the Bernard Osher Foundation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks again to our special guest on today's program. And last but not least, thanks to all of you in the room and everyone watching and listening online. You can find more programs at commonwealthclub.org. Thanks and have a great week.
And happy Chasten Buttigieg Day.
Yay!